Most people appear to agree that the National Performance Framework and national outcomes do aim to set out the kind of country that we want Scotland to be, and that's largely because they are based on the UN Sustainable Goals. I am unsure as to whether in Craighoy's local pub people would be familiar with the UN Sustainable Goals, but when it comes to governments taking those northern lights, as it were, and trying to set a framework around them, that's what we are seeking to do. We do want it to be a framework for all of Scotland. It may not be instantly recognised across Scotland. We recognise that government needs to lead on that work. But ultimately, we are committing this afternoon to properly review the National Performance Framework for all the reasons that have been set out for the longer term, and to work with Parliament to ensure that we set out some clear goals that we can base Scotland's progress on. So to come to people's very specific points, the first is around whether or not the economy should be identified more clearly. I think it should be identified more clearly. I think that my job title is Cabinet Secretary for the Economy. We have identified economic growth as one of the First Minister's 4 priorities, and obviously the review happened just as I went on maternity leave, and some of the changes happened when I was out of government. But under John Swinney's government, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that we believe in economic growth for a purpose. That prosperity needs to be shared as fairly as possible, which is why I have some sympathy with Daniel Johnson, who set out the fact that economic growth per head of population basically is a good measure. The second point is Michelle Thompson asked a number of questions, the extent to which the National Performance Framework actually informs discussions in Cabinet. What is the actual use of it? How do we collect data? I think those are all good questions to start our conversation around what should replace the National Performance Framework and how we do embed the UN Sustainable Goals in a way that is both a useful tool as well as a useful aim. Pam Gossel set out some of the objectives that we should be very serious in facing up to. Gender inequality being a very obvious one, and questions around domestic abuse and so on. These are the lived experiences of people across the country, questions around justice. And at the end of the day, irrespective of what shiny framework we have to measure our own progress, we have to listen to those whose experience is anything but fair or just. And to Alex Rowley's point, I am a big believer that the biggest societal changes that have happened have not come out of tick box exercises. They have come out, that transformation work has come out of a real focus on delivering the change that we need to deliver in partnership, treating people as equals. I think it's a lot easier to do that if you have a framework that everyone can get behind, because that identifies where the money should be spent, the most effective policies for delivering that. And if there's anything I think we need to hear more of in Scotland, is that frank, open debate in civic Scotland, i.e. outside Parliament, on the big policy changes that would make the biggest impact. Presiding Officer, I'm afraid I don't actually know how much time I have, so I will go on to talk about Ben Macpherson's comments, calculating that quickly, 6 minutes. I've got 45 seconds. So on Ben Macpherson's point, I think it's nail on head to identify that what leads to long-term change is a number of different shared outcomes that we can all get behind. Going back to sitting on the Sustainable Growth Commission a number of years ago, what came through loud and clear from comparable countries that had delivered the biggest change, particularly around economic prosperity, was that they looked over a 25-year period. And irrespective of who was in government, there was a shared view, shared perspective on what would lead to the biggest change, and that stakeholders could rely on the government delivering on those changes irrespective of who was in government. And I think Ben Macpherson is absolutely right, and he identifies precisely why we do need a framework And we do need clear goals to get behind, and that is what we propose to do. Thank you.